In this video, we're going to talk about Module 1, Topic 2, Lesson 4, and this is Part 3. So we're still talking about forms of quadratic functions, and in this video, we're going to focus on standard form and finding the x-intercepts, the zeros, the roots, the solutions. So by the end of this video, you should be able to answer these questions. Why is factoring useful for solving quadratic equations? Once you have your quadratic equation factored, how do you solve for the zeros? What does the sign of C mean for your factors? And how can I verify that my factored form is correct? So here we go. This right here is just telling us how to find our x-intercepts, our roots, our zeros, or solutions. And that is by setting our function equal to 0, factoring it, setting those factors equal to 0, and solving. So if you're a step person, when you need the slide and divide method, here is your steps, and here are the examples here. So step 1 is to slide A over and multiply times times C. So that would be this step right here. That is step number 1. Step number 2 is trying to find two numbers that multiply to get A times C and add to get B. So that's kind of what we did over here using the X. That would be our step number 2. 3, we would write our answers in factored form. So that would be this step right here. 4, we would divide the factored form, or divide the constants by the factors of A. So that's this step right here. So 3 and 4 are kind of in the same step. 5 and 6 are kind of in the same step. Simplify the fraction, and if the denominator does not cancel out, slide it in front. So this is 5 and 6 right here. And then set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. That would be this step right here. Okay, so if you need to go back and review those steps, you have them there. We're going to go through some of these. Now, not every single one of these problems actually requires the slide and divide method. The slide and divide method is when you have a number in front of the x squared that is not 1. If you cannot factor out a greatest common factor first. So, here we go. Find the zeros of each quadratic function. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to set our function equal to 0. So first thing I want you to notice is that the x squared is negative, and that is a no-no. We don't like when that's negative. It makes us sad. So what we need to do is we need to factor out a greatest common factor, which is the negative. So I'm going to factor out a negative, which essentially means I'm dividing each term by a -1. But that negative goes out in front. So when I do that, I get a positive x squared, a positive 8x, and a -20. Then we get to figure out what we can multiply to get a -20. And those same two numbers have to add to get us a positive 8, or subtract. So those two numbers would be a positive 10 and a -2. So that negative out in front stays there, but I'm going to have two factors now. One that is x plus 10. The second one, which is x minus 2. Okay. This method, or this example, did not require the slide and divide method because there was a number, not a number in front of x squared that couldn't be factored out of everything. Once it's a 1x squared, you don't have to worry about slide and divide. Okay, so now that we've done that, you can go ahead and set each factor equal to 0, and you can solve each factor. So to do so, we would subtract 10 from both sides, and we get x is equal to a -10. And on this one, we could add 2 to both sides, and we can get x is equal to 2. So there are the x-intercepts. Now, how can you check yourself? You have a couple different ways. One, this right here is factored form. So let's write that out. This method, or this part right here, is factored form. Okay? If you have factored form, you can multiply it out and it should get you standard form. So you could take this, multiply it out, and you should get what you started with. Option number 2, you could take this and graph it, and then graph this, and they should be the same graph. Okay? Option number 3, when you have your x-intercepts, your roots, your zeros, you could plug one number in for all the x's, and you should get 0. Then you will do the same thing, and again, you should get 0 if you plug in -10 and 2. So that's a couple different ways you can check yourself. Now, the sign of C is telling you whether your signs are going to be the same or different. So once we factored out that negative sign, the sign of C was negative, which is why our signs were different. Okay, and this right here is the sign of the bigger number, which is why 10 is positive. So a couple things just to show you that. Okay, now looking at letter B, let's go ahead and set our function equal to 0. And then we look to see, is there a greatest common factor? Is there a number that goes into 9, -18, and 8 evenly? And the answer is no. So that means for this particular problem, we are going to need to use the slide and divide method. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and draw in my x. This helps me organize my thinking. So we're going to take 9 times 8. That gives us 72. Then we want to take two numbers to add and get a -18. We want to multiply to get 72, add to get a -18. Okay, multiply to get 72, add to get 18. So if you go through your factors, okay, you can go in your calculator, you can type 72 divided by x in the graph screen and pull up the table. And so what we're looking for are two numbers that can multiply to get 72, and those same two numbers can add to get us a -18. So those two numbers are going to be -12 and -6. When this is positive, the last sign is positive, your signs will be the same, and they will be whatever sign that is, which is why these are both negative. So what you do here is you write your factors, x minus 12 times x minus 6. But if you stop here and you try to multiply this out, you are not going to get what we started with. So that is not your factors. You're not done. You did the slide part by multiplying the 9 and the 8. Now you have to do the divide part. Now you have to divide by that same number that we multiplied with in the beginning. So then you simplify the fraction. X minus 12 over 9 simplifies to be 4 over 3. And 6 over 9 simplifies to be 2 over 3. This is still not your factors. What you do now is you're going to take these numbers, because the denominators did not simplify out. You are going to slide them in front of the x that it's directly with. And so we're going to have 3x minus 4 and 3x minus 2. Now, if you were to take this and multiply it out, you will get what we started with in the very beginning. So now that we have it factored, this is our factored form. Now that we have it factored, we can set each factor equal to 0, and we can solve for x. So on the first one, we will add 4 to both sides. We get 3x equals 4. Then we will divide by 3, and we get x is equal to 4/3. On the second equation, we are going to add 2 to both sides. We get 3x is equal to 2. Divide both sides by 3, and we get x is equal to a 2/3. Okay, and so those would be our zeros. So what could we do to check ourselves? 1, we could type in our original equation, type in our factored form to see if we get the same graph. 2, we can multiply this out to see if we get the same equation that we started with. And 3, we could plug in one x value at a time, plug it in and make sure that we get 0, and then do the same thing with the second one, plugging it in to make sure we get 0. Okay, so now looking at letter C. Letter C is when most people go into straight slide and divide. But the very first thing you should look for when you're doing a slide and divide is there a greatest common factor? So let's go ahead and set our equation equal to 0. And we notice now that this is all divisible by 2. So when we do that, we have 2 times x squared plus 15x plus 50. And since we did that, notice now there's not a number in front of our x squared. So therefore, slide and divide is not required here. Okay, so we want to multiply to get the last number, add to get the middle number. And so what can we multiply to get 50 and add to get 15? That is going to be a 10 and a 5. So when we write this out, that 2 gets hanging out in the front. We know we're going to have x and x, and we have plus 10 plus 5. And this is our factored form. So let's make a note of that. So with our factored form, we're going to set each factor equal to 0. And we are going to subtract 10 from both sides. And so we get x is equal to a negative 10. Subtract 5, we get x is equal to a negative 5. And we have our 2 zeros. So again, you could graph this, and see if it's the same graph. 2, you can multiply this out and you should get this equation. And 3, you can plug in each x value one at a time and you should get 0. And that's how you know that you did this correctly. You don't have to do all 3, just pick one and that's what you do. Again, this last sign tells you a lot. It tells you that your signs are going to be the same and they're both going to be positive, which is why we had a positive 10 and a positive 5. Okay, looking at the next one, we're going to go ahead and set our equation equal to 0. And just like the very first example, we have a negative in front, so we want to make sure that we factor out the negative first. And so when we do that, we're essentially dividing each term by a negative 1. And so that gives us an x squared minus 9 equals 0. So since we did that, there is no longer a number in front of the x squared. And so now we can go ahead and set this up. So 9 or negative 9 is what we want to multiply to get. And notice we're missing that middle term. So we're trying to get 0. So what can we multiply to get negative 9 but add to get 0? That means that our numbers need to be the same, but one needs to be negative and one needs to be positive. So that would be a negative 3 and a positive 3. So this factors into x minus 3 times x plus 3. Now that we have that, we can set each factor equal to 0. And so we would add 3 to both sides, and we get x is equal to 3. Here we would subtract 3 from both sides, and we would get x is equal to a negative 3. And there would be the 2 zeros. Now I did want to add one question here to make sure that we were able to do the slide and divide method. So I want you to try to do the slide and divide method on your own and then come back and check to see how you did. Okay, so hopefully you gave this a try. Let's go ahead and set this equal to 0. And so this one does not have a greatest common factor. So slide and divide is needed because we have a number in front of the x squared. So we're going to take that, multiply it by the last number. That would be a negative 24. And we want to add to get 2. Multiply to get a negative 24, add to get 2. So that would be a positive 6 and a negative 4. And so we get the factors of x plus 6 and x minus 4. But that doesn't equal what we started with, so we got to make sure that we do the slide and then the divide. Slide and then the divide. So we simplify this. 6 over 8 simplifies to 3 over 4. And 4 over 8 simplifies to 1 over 2. So when the numbers don't, or the denominators don't simplify completely, remember those go in front of the x that it's with. And so we get a 4x plus 3 and a 2x minus 1. And now we have the factored version of this. That is our factored form. So then we go ahead and set each factor equal to 0. And we get minus 3 minus 3. 4x is equal to a negative 3. Divide by 4. X is equal to a negative 3/4. Here we plus 1 plus 1. 2x is equal to 1. Divide both sides by 2. X is equal to a 1/2. So there would be your 2x intercepts for this. Okay, so hopefully you're able to get that. If you have any questions, please make sure you write them down and ask in class.